How skeptical are you? Is your skepticism rooted in critical thinking, or is it more rooted in cynicism and hopelessness? What inspired this video is I was watching the news and they had a focus group of Trump supporters, and this was right after the inauguration of Joe Biden, and they were talking to the Trump supporters and asking them how they felt, and of course they weren't feeling very good because the person who they wanted to win did not win. And I know what that feels like, to be on the losing team or to not get the person elected who you were voting for. When the person running the focus group was asking questions, basically what I kept hearing over and over again was this skepticism that was so deep rooted that it sounded very much like hopelessness. Like they didn't know what to believe anymore. They didn't know where to find valid news sources anymore. They weren't even the ones that they had been using up to that point. They didn't even believe those anymore. A lot of them were basically saying, well, like, I don't even know where to go and find factual information or real information or real news anymore. It didn't matter how much the leader of the focus group would put actual facts out there. Like he was citing things that were not on the right or on the left politically. They were just facts. The people would respond with, well, that's not true, or that didn't happen. And he's like, well, no, this is actually factual. And this is not a partisan thing, but no, this actually happened, or this actually did not happen. And every time he would say something like that, they would just go, well, but that's what you think, or that's what was reported, or that's what you were told. And there was like zero acceptance of anything, whether it was even what they wanted to hear or what they didn't want to hear. They were feeling that loss, that they would just shoot down everything. That's an extreme degree of skepticism. So like I said, I am familiar with this feeling. I have gone through my own phases of cynicism and extreme skepticism, even to the point of a little bit of paranoia. When I first moved to Los Angeles, I got fired from the first few jobs that I had had, and I had never been fired from a job before, and I didn't understand why. Now that, or after reading a lot of Robert Greene's work, when we talk about the 48 laws of power and things like that, it makes a lot more sense to me. But at the time, I couldn't understand it. I thought, I'm doing a good job. Why am I getting fired? And it made me really paranoid whenever I would go for even a job interview and the person would ask me questions. I'd be like, well, why is he asking that question? Or why is she asking that question? Or they gave me a nice warm handshake. Are they trying to set me up for something? You know, I was really that paranoid. And even after I got the job, I was still constantly worried that someone was going to set me up and get me fired. And so I know what that extreme feelings are like, because what you think is true or know to be true, suddenly it's ripped out from underneath you, and you feel really lost and you don't know what to believe or what to grab onto. Now, before I go any further, if you find yourself liking this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button and the bell so you'll be notified when I put new videos out, which is usually Wednesdays and Saturdays. And if you're a little impatient and you want to know what I'm giving away for free in this video, if you just drop down to the description right here and see there's a link right down here, you click that link and you'll see what it is that I'm giving away for free. One of the things I like about NLP, Neuro-Linguistic Programming, when it's taught well, is you do want to be a bit skeptical. And I've done this with clients because if you know how to build rapport very well, and you do build rapport very well, either with a client you're working with or you're teaching a group of people, and you say, all right, do you understand this? If you're in really good rapport with the group and you ask if they understand, a lot of times they want to just answer yes, simply because they want to stay in rapport. They don't want to break that rapport by mismatching and saying, well, no, I don't really understand. And a lot of times people are afraid to say that they don't understand, not just because they might be a little bit embarrassed. There's plenty of people who say that they understand something and they just kind of nod their head and go along simply because they want to stay in rapport. And that can be coaching one-on-one, or that can be even with a group of people. Sometimes what I'll do when I don't really believe it, when a person says, yeah, that works for me, or that gave me a shift, or when I'm teaching and the people say, yeah, I understand it, I'll say, I'm not convinced. I want, tell me more. What is your experience of whatever it is, that I'm asking you? I want to know more about their experience, so they can tell me. It'll become clear once they answer that question whether or not they're really getting it or it's really working for them. And I would say as a coach and as a teacher, never be afraid to do that. There's a certain amount of honesty that comes with that whenever you're willing to basically say, hey, I'm not really convinced. I know you want to agree with me. I know you want this to be working for you. But it's really important to me that that this is actually working for you. What I will say too is that there usually isn't enough skepticism in NLP circles and NLP institutes where everybody just wants to kind of agree with the teacher. No one is willing to question the teacher because it might seem rude, and that's just not going to help people learn that well. You want to have a healthy skepticism. You want to be willing to question, and the teacher should be willing to be questioned. Sometimes I feel like the best teaching I've ever done was when a student was questioning me, and not in a way of trying to just shoot down everything that I'm saying, but really trying to understand what it is that I'm saying. And so I always welcome that. And that's a healthy sense of skepticism. A healthy sense of skepticism will make you learn better. It will keep you honest with yourself. The not so healthy skepticism is the skepticism where you just shoot everything down, like nothing is good enough. Anytime the person says something, you already have your bias. And if your bias is very, very cynical, like, well, nothing works, then you're just going to keep shooting things down, and you will be correct. You will make sure that nothing works because you've already made that choice. You've already made that decision. So make sure that your skepticism is not coming from a place like that your skepticism is really coming from a place of, I want to know the truth, and I'm really, really curious. And that will serve you very, very well. What I like to say to people is be a scientist. Go at something like a scientist would, trying to be objective and questioning things in order to learn, in order to find out more information about something. That's a great mindset to have. Also be aware of your emotions. If something is appealing to your emotions, it's much easier to overlook logic. And in this sense, being skeptical, there's a certain sense, I think, emotionally that you're being had, you're being taken advantage of, you're being made a fool of. And so I can, my defensive response to that emotionally is to just close everything off and be shut off to everything and think that everyone's out to get you, and nothing anyone tells you is valid or sincere. And so it's really an emotional defense mechanism when you're that skeptical. You want to check in. Is that what's happening for you when you're being skeptical? Is it coming from an emotional place, or is it coming from a very open-minded, very objective, emotionless place? Now, I'm not saying that emotions are bad. We need emotions, but we don't necessarily want to make decisions from emotions. Emotions don't tell us a lot of good information about what's actually happening around us. They absolutely need to be factored in, but we don't want to use our emotions as information to make decisions on. We want to use real information that we can verify. One of the things that comes to mind when I think about this, and I think about NLP circles and emotions, is how much a lot of teachers will work at emotionally charging their students, getting the whole crowd to be emotionally charged. And one of the things that a very well-known NLPer does is that the firewalking process, where they actually talk people through walking over hot coals. And the idea being that, well, if you can do something that seems impossible, then it opens you up to more possibilities, and it gives you a lot more confidence in going out there and trying things that seem impossible. All of this sounds really good, and I'm not against firewalking. I think if you want to do firewalking, go right ahead, but you can't ignore the emotional component to firewalking. When you do something that you felt was impossible, you do something that's really out of the norm for you, something you're afraid of, and you overcome that fear, you're going to release a lot of emotion. And if not harnessed correctly, or if it goes ungrounded, this will not serve you very well. It could send you off into trying things or doing things that, or let's just say doing something without really doing your due diligence. It's an emotional choice. It's an emotional decision. My mentor once told me that after coming back from one of these week-long seminars, they went out in a way to commit to their business. They had taken out a lease for $25,000 on an office building for a year for a business they didn't even have yet. But that was the idea. They were so driven. It's like, well, I know I'm going to start this business, so I'm going to go and take out a lease on an office. pay the money up front, and then the business never happened. The money was completely wasted. So be careful about getting sucked into your emotions that way. And that extreme kind of skepticism and cynicism is emotionally driven. It's not logical. There are things that we can verify. There are things that we can use evidence. And by gathering that evidence, we can do our due diligence and find out if something is actually real or not real. In NLP, also, they use something called the TOTE, test, operate, test, exit. Now, the founders and the developers of NLP did not create that concept, but they used it. It's a huge part of NLP, test, operate, test, exit. And that is, you do something and then you test it, and then you operate if you haven't gotten the result that you want, and then you test it again. And as soon as you test it and you have the result that you want, then you exit. So for example, hammering a nail into a piece of wood, the operation would be the hammering the nail. Then you maybe slide your hand across the wood and see if the nail is flush. If it's not, this is the test. If it's not, then you keep operating. After every time you operate, then you test. And if that nail is flush with the wood, then you would exit. You would not do this anymore. You not keep hammering the wood or the nail, you'd be done. There's one quick story that I'd like to relate. It was an experience that I had with my mentor, Steve Andreas. He had an opinion about something that he had seen in one of my videos, and it actually wasn't even about me, but it was one of my videos. So he sent me an email and said, "Hey, I'm not buying this." And so he had a very healthy sense of skepticism. And I said, well, I gave him my opinion about it. And then we started going back and forth, and we went back and forth enough times. And I was actually very concerned. I had questioned NLP trainers before, top NLP trainers before. The results of that didn't go very well. Like a lot of the NLP teachers that I have questioned didn't like being questioned. Steve was not like that. He was really trying to understand my perspective, which I thought was interesting, but I was still concerned. I was like, this is he's an NLP legend. My hands were actually shaking part of the time when I was typing the emails, and I was like, should I actually be saying this? Should I be questioning him this harshly? And we went back and forth a few times, and then we finally found some common ground. And then we also just agreed that at a certain point, we would just not agree on this. So we went ahead and let it go. He said, not many people have ever done that. You really surprised me that you kept on and you persisted with your point. You must really feel that you must feel passionate about what you think. And I said, well, true, but I was really nervous about questioning you like that. And he wrote back and said, well, why were you nervous? Actually, I admire and respect that you were willing to question me. And I said, well, you're Steve Andreas. You're an NLP legend. Who am I to question the master? And he wrote me back and he said, if I ever act that way, like I'm the master who cannot be questioned, he said, assassinate me. I love that story because it really tells what kind of teacher and mentor Steve was. He did not think he was above being questioned. And so that healthy skepticism is going to come out in that behavior of questioning. And that doesn't mean we have to be disrespectful. We can question and be respectful about it. And if still a person cannot take that kind of questioning, you got to kind of have to ask the question, what might they be hiding, or what are they insecure about? That's usually what it's really about. So to summarize everything, when you are using NLP, I think it's a great idea to have a healthy sense of skepticism. If something doesn't really seem to have worked, it probably didn't. And even if it did, it still doesn't hurt to question it. So question it. Whether that's change work you're doing on yourself or change work you're doing with clients, or if you're just using it with sales or negotiation, the more you test, the better you're going to become. If you think about anything in the world that, like martial arts, the martial art that had been tested quite a bit was Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And when they had the first few UFCs, the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu artists would just dominate, because that was a style that really you just do a lot of sparring, you do a lot of testing. And so the more you test, the better your practice is going to be. And that's just with anything. So make sure you come at what you're doing, whether it's NLP or anything, with a healthy sense of skepticism. Now, if you start shooting everything down, and you're in that place of like, well, I don't believe anything and nothing's true, check your emotions on that one. That's probably where that's coming from more than anything else. So check your emotions and then ask yourself, is this really useful? And I can assure you it's not. Healthy sense of skepticism with an open mind and plenty of curiosity. And that's the way you're going to progress, not just in NLP, but in anything. If you'd like to take this even deeper, I have a free 30-day sensory acuity and calibration training that you can take. It's right here in the description below. And how it relates to what I've been talking about in this video is nonverbals. Nonverbals don't lie. We can lie, right? We can say something that's different than what is actually true, but our nonverbal communication doesn't lie. So when you train yourself to not only pick up on your own nonverbal communication, but pick up on the nonverbal communication of other people, you become an incredibly good communicator. Now, you won't be able to always tell when someone's lying. I did a video on that recently. I'll link that video to this video, but it will help you with that. It will help you be able to just see and listen to that communication that is mostly unconscious for all of us. And like I said, this will take your communication skills so much further. If you like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. And remember, if you haven't already, click that subscribe button and the bell so you'll be notified when I put new videos out. And last but not least, if you can think of a friend or a family member who would benefit from this video, make sure you share it with them. Take care.